Palestinian fighters on Thursday, that is today, released more Israelis and Thai nationals that they had held captive for over 15 months. Three Israelis released today are Arbel Yahud, Agam Berger, and Gadi Moses. In return, Israel is expected to release 110 Palestinian hostages held in Israeli concentration camps for several years. They include 30, yes, 30 women and children. These are the people that Western propaganda outlets such as the BBC, the CNN, New York Times, Washington Post, and Guardian, among others, describe prisoners. Children kidnapped by Israeli terrorists and then held in their concentration camps for several years are prisoners for these propaganda outlets. This is to legitimize Israeli war crimes and protect the Zionists from future consequences. Anyway, trust the BBC to really act as the official mouthpiece of Benjamin Netanyahu when it comes to reporting on the Gaza conflict and beyond. The BBC gave more than an hour long non-stop live coverage to the release of three Israelis, including an IDF soldier. Would they give the same non-stop coverage to the release of Palestinians from Israeli concentration camps? No. How do I know that? Because I saw their coverage during the first and second rounds of exchanges. Coming back to today, BBC presenter Anita McVeigh was speaking to her Middle East representative Yolande Nell, who told her that the released Israelis will be taken for medical and psychological checkups. This was enough for Anita McVeigh to ask a follow-up question on how the 15-month of captivity will take a long time for these Israelis to recover from. Fair question? Yes. If BBC presenters asked the same follow-up question for the sake of editorial impartiality and due balance while talking about Palestinians as well. But they didn't. And that's what I'm here to expose today. But first, watch these golden words by Anita McVeigh.
Before they are taken by military helicopter to the hospitals, where they will undergo further medical checks and psychological testing as well.
Yes, because although we've seen images of huge relief on their faces, smiles on their faces, the families of the hostages are absolutely elated to be reunited with their loved ones. There is that moment of joy, but being held in captivity for 15 months is not something that most of us can imagine, and that will take a long period of recovery, apart from the physical recovery, the mental recovery as well.
Indeed, and there are psychological experts who are standing by at the hospitals to help with that once routine medical checks have been completed.
Anita didn't stop here. She then went on to add how Palestinian groups had organized the event to release Israelis as part of their propaganda. Minutes later, Anita's colleague Mariam Mashiri, a BBC presenter of Iranian origin, took over. Mariam spoke to Wyre Davies in the occupied West Bank. Wyre explained the catastrophic impact that years of incarceration of Palestinians inside Israeli concentration camps had left on them. He also explained, whilst all Israelis being released by Palestinian fighters had the liberty to return to their loved ones, many Palestinians would not have that luxury, as Israelis have forced them into exile and they will only be allowed to go to Egypt or other countries after their release.
Well, let's cross live now and speak to our correspondent Wyre Davies, who is in the West Bank town of Ramallah. And we're awaiting the next stage of this hostage exchange, and that is the prisoner release from the Israeli side.
Yeah, this is a choreographed process now. It has been going on, even though the ceasefire itself does seem at times to be fragile. But once all of those hostages are safely inside Israel, the next process should be the release of about 110 Palestinian prisoners who are being held in Israeli jails. About 60 of those are due to come here to the West Bank, the occupied West Bank town of Ramallah. Several of those are said to be women and children. The youngest person is 15 years old. Some of those prisoners will have been held in preventative detention and they won't have been charged with specific crimes. Others have been convicted of much more serious crimes, life sentences in some cases, and in 21 cases those prisoners are not being allowed to come back to the occupied Palestinian territories. They're going to be exiled to Egypt and other neighbouring Arab countries. But as I said, about 60 people will be returning here to Ramallah, to the West Bank. I've spoken to several families eagerly anticipating the return of their loved ones. We've spoken to two sisters, 22 and 21 years old, respectively. The youngest one has never seen her father. Her mother was pregnant with her when he was detained and arrested for his involvement in the Second Intifada back in 2003. And she's saying, I've never known what it's like to have a father. I've never hugged or touched my father. So quite emotional scenes, but those people haven't been released as we understand yet. That will happen now, again, as part of this choreographed process of prisoners being released after the hostages are released in Gaza.
Wyre, thank you.
You'd have expected that, like Anita, Mariam too would have asked a follow-up question to Wyre Davies to highlight the psychological scar left on Palestinians. But Mariam was quick to say thank you to her colleague. There was no time for BBC presenter to dwell on the psychological scar left on Palestinians. Palestinians don't have psychological disorders, even after being brutalized by Israeli terrorists for many years. Israelis have the BBC to whitewash their crimes against humanity. Palestinians don't have such an ally in the media. It's astonishing how the BBC continues to expose itself every single day with its incredibly biased media coverage. This organization was biased even when I was a part of it, but their biases were tacit and indirect. They have become brazen now, as they do not care about anyone, not even those who pay license fees. The BBC of today makes even Russia Today look more credible. That's how pathetic the journalism of my former employer has become. Has the BBC uttered a single word against the ongoing Israeli atrocities in the occupied West Bank? Israeli terrorists are shooting children in their chest to kill them for fun. But the BBC wouldn't care to talk about the psychological scar of these Palestinians. That's it from me. Thank you very much for your support of this platform and our journalism on buymeacoffee.com and Patreon. If you too think that our journalism is worth supporting, then you too should consider becoming part of it. The details are there in the description of this video. In the meantime, if you haven't subscribed to my channel, please do so, because that's one of the many ways you can support independent journalism. God bless you all.